All right, it is 10 a.m. This is Brian Sobel, and I would like to call to order the teleconference meeting of the Finance-Auditing Committee of Thursday, September 24th, 2020. Before we begin, please note this meeting is being recorded. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Thank you. Starting with Director Cochran.
Here.
Present. Director Grosball. Absent. Director Moylan.
Here.
Present. Director Yee. Absent. Vice Chair Frederick.
Here.
Present. Chair Sobel.
Here.
Present. And President Parr.
Present.
Present. You have a quorum, but you are also a committee of the whole. You have on the line Director Belforte, Director Hernandez, Director Hill, Director Maston, Director Rabbit, and Director Theriault.
Wonderful.
I'm going to confirm the staff on the line, starting with Dennis Mulligan. I hear you've joined us.
Present.
Thank you. Joe Wire, are you on the line?
Yes.
Thank you. And Eva Bauer-Furbish, are you on the line?
Present.
Present, thank you. And Kim Manolius, are you on the line still?
I am, thanks.
Thank you. Steve Miller, are you on the line?
Present.
Present. Mona Babauta, are you back with us?
Yes, present.
Thank you. Jim Swindler, are you on the line?
Yes, I am.
Thank you. And Kelly Hopper, are you here?
Present.
Great. That confirms the staff on the line.
Very good. I would like to remind everyone to mute their phones until after staff's presentations and we open up for directors' discussion. If there are questions, the Secretary will call on you accordingly. After the director's discussion, we will ask for any public comment before taking a roll call vote. The pages of the meeting packet are numbered on the bottom right-hand corner for ease of following along. Madam Secretary, would you please introduce the first item for us?
Thank you, Chair Sobel. Item number 3 is ratification of previous actions by the Auditor Controller. Pack of commitments, ratification, and investments is before you begins on page 3, and Leslie Murphy is on the line to provide a report. Ms. Murphy, go ahead and join us.
Well, good morning, everyone. Can you hear me?
We can. Good morning, Leslie. Looking forward to your presentation.
Excellent. Well, we've got some numbers in store for us this morning, so we will jump right in without any further ado. We'll go ahead and turn to page 8 of your agenda packet, page 1 of my prepared report.
Leslie,
yes.
Can you hold 1 second? A reminder to people on the phone to please mute. We're getting some cross conversation, so if you would remember to mute your phone, Leslie, I'll invite you to continue, and sorry about that.
No problem.
Good to go.
Excellent. Thank you. So maybe that's given us a second to turn to page 8 of our agenda packet, as we'll go ahead and get started, as usual, with an update to the U.S. Treasury universe. So we'll focus in, as always, on the yield on the 2-year U.S. Treasury note as shown in the top half of this page. Really, that's a good proxy for the types of securities that we're able to buy in your portfolio. So zooming out and looking at the past year, we can see it's really dramatic how far rates have fallen. A year ago, the 2-year Treasury was yielding about a 1.5%. As of the end of August, we were at about a 13 basis points, so a 0.13%. And you can see that sharp drop in late February and through the middle of March. That was really as a result of the Fed cutting the overnight Fed funds target rate all the way down to its current range of between 0.25% in an effort to stimulate the financial markets and do what they can to prop up the economy. So taking a look at August in particular, what we actually saw during the month of August is what we would call a slight steepening of the yield curve. So not just looking at 2-year maturities, but looking across the curve, we can see that rates increased a bit over the month, but that increase was more pronounced on the longer end of the curve. So that was really as a result of the Federal Reserve announcement of a shift towards average inflation targeting. So essentially this means that the Fed will be more inclined to allow inflation to run higher than its stated 2% target before hiking interest rates, in recognition of the fact that inflation currently and throughout recent history has been running under that 2% target. So investors kind of took that information to mean that shorter term yields are expected to remain lower for longer, but that inflation will be allowed to run a little bit hotter. So because of that, we saw a slight uptick in yields out further along on the curve. So we'll skip over the next couple of slides on the Fed, the labor market, and major market indicators, because today is the day that we'll dedicate to our annual portfolio performance check-in. But while we're skipping back through our respective agenda packets, I thought it might be interesting to make a pit stop on page 12 of your agenda packet. So as you might recall, a couple of months ago, I reported some information on a small business pulse survey produced by PricewaterhouseCoopers, and there was some interest in committee members in revisiting that topic. Now, unfortunately, that PwC survey data is not always available in its entirety, but luckily for us, the Census Bureau seems to have picked up the charge, and they've been publishing also a small business pulse survey. So I thought it'd be interesting to include an update to some of that data here. So this looks at kind of the same information, small business owner sentiment. So the question that we're focusing in on today are, when do small firms expect business operations to return to normal levels? So in late April of 2020, 31% of respondents said that they thought it would take 6 months or more to return to normal. By mid-August, though, sentiment had turned a bit more pessimistic. At that time, 47% of survey respondents anticipated 6 months or more to a return to normal operations. So I think this is kind of in keeping with what we've been seeing in recent months. It looks like the pandemic is here to stay longer than most of us had anticipated. As a result, business owner sentiment has turned a bit more sour as well. But I thought this would be an interesting chart to include for the group, and this is something that we can look to update you all on periodically. Moving ahead to page 13 of the agenda packet, getting more into the meat of today's discussion. So just as a recap, every month we report out to you portfolio yield information. In the background, every quarter I also review total return data with Joe and his staff, and every year I'll report out total return data as of June 30 to this committee. So just as a quick review, let's compare yield versus total return. So yield is what we hear a lot more about in the fixed income markets. Yield is forward-looking. It expresses an annualized earnings rate at a point in time. Yield is known at the time the security is purchased. On the flip side, though, total return, which we'll focus on today, total return is backward-looking. It's a historic number that expresses a rate of return over a specific period. Periods of less than a year are unannualized, and total return takes a much more holistic look at the performance of a fixed income portfolio because it takes into account trading activity, so realized gains and losses, also market value changes, so those unrealized change in market value, as well as interest earnings. So total return is made up of two main components, income, which is closely tied to that yield at cost number, and change in market value. So we find ourselves for this past fiscal year in kind of the second scenario that we've shown at the bottom of page 13. Interest rates dropped so dramatically in the markets that resulted in a nice positive market value appreciation for your existing holdings. Now, some of your older, higher yielding holdings are now looking much more attractive to investors relative to current fixed income rates. So that was actually a good thing in your portfolio, and we'll see why in coming pages. Moving ahead to page 15, to kind of put some numbers to this, again, that total return number that we'll talk about is made up of two components, interest earned and change in market value. So that interest earned number, you can think of this as real money in your pocket. This is the amortized value of all the coupon payments for all the securities in your portfolio. That number is more stable quarter to quarter. It had been increasing just recently. We've seen it fall off a little bit, again, as some of those older, higher yielding securities roll out of your portfolio, but still very respectable, about $5.6 million in interest earnings over the past 12 months. That second component of total return is change in market value. So this includes both realized and unrealized gains. Really what's been moving the needle the most for us lately are those unrealized market value gains. You can see some pretty high numbers for the two most recent quarters. Over the past year, total change in market value positive to the tune of about $3.6 million, total portfolio earnings of about $9 million, and a total return as a percentage of a 3.66%. So maybe we should just pause and kind of take in that 3.66% total return for the past year, because unfortunately, it doesn't seem likely that we'll see a number that high in the future. The fact that we've been able to capitalize on a lot of that positive unrealized market value appreciation is great, but given where rates are now, it seems unlikely that they'll fall further, which means that it's unlikely we'll see those big positive unrealized market value gains continue. And interest earnings, as I mentioned, could kind of fall off as well as some of those older, higher yielding securities roll out of the portfolio. Nonetheless, we will continue to actively trade and actively monitor the markets to add value. Moving on to page 16, we don't think it's enough to just look at your portfolio performance numbers in a vacuum. Really, to get a real sense of how your portfolio is performing versus the market, we'll need to compare the performance of your portfolio versus some market indices. So let's move down to the second segment of numbers on the middle of this page. So what's really going to determine how your fixed income portfolio will perform over time is both sector allocation and duration. So looking at that effective duration column, you can see the duration of your portfolio is about 1.1 years. So conservatively short of a lot of the indices that we've shown. Now, duration is also a good barometer of interest rate risk. So the longer the duration, the greater the upside potential, but also the greater risk. So your portfolio is conservatively short on duration for two main reasons. One are some periodic instructions that we received to conservatively temporarily halt trading that were in place for a couple of weeks over the past year. Secondarily, we have been holding a greater percentage of your funds liquid in LACE, which has a very short duration, but as an overnight liquidity option, it is offering a nice yield advantage over most fixed income securities. So kind of the closest comparative that we've shown here is that first option, that 0 to 3 year U.S. Treasury index. So you can see that for the past quarter and also for all other time periods, including since inception, your portfolio has generated nice positive outperformance versus that index. Looking out over the longer term, even compared to some of these longer dated indices, your portfolio has delivered some nice, strong outperformance as well, which we can really attribute to Michael Verano and his team's active trading, actively monitoring the markets for relative value opportunities, and our selective use of high-quality non-government sectors as permitted by both code and your policy. Moving on to page 17 of your agenda packet, if you wanted to kind of take a longer look and think about how changes in the interest rates impact the performance of your portfolio and also the performance of these other market indices that we're looking at, well, that's exactly what we've included here. So this is taking a look all the way back to the last time the Fed was in a cutting cycle of interest rates back in 2007 and 2008. So essentially what happens when rates fall, again, that's positive for the total return performance of fixed income securities across the board. Since your portfolio is a little bit short of a lot of the indices that we show, it's not able to fully capitalize on all that market value appreciation in the immediate quarter, but in following quarters, we tend to be able to catch that up versus even these longer duration benchmarks. And that's what we've seen between the first quarter and the second quarter of 2020 as well. Moving on to page 18, even with interest rates at very low absolute levels, we still are looking to capitalize on those relative value opportunities. One interesting purchase to pull out on here would be that taxable muni bond that we purchased, issued by California State University, and that was issued at a nice yield pickup relative to U.S. Treasury notes. Skipping all the way back now to page 20 of your agenda packet, Of course, your portfolio does remain in compliance with both California government code and your investment policy, and it remains well diversified by both sector and issuer. And again, even though we do look to boost the earnings and the performance of your portfolio, we will not lose sight of the fact that our number one and our number two priorities for you are to maintain both the safety and the liquidity of your holdings with us. I know I went a little bit over time kind of digging into the numbers today, but that brings me now to the end of my report. I'm happy to entertain any questions.
Great. Thank you, Leslie. Are there questions for Leslie from, board members?
This is Bert. I've got a question.
Wonderful. Go ahead, Bert.
Yeah, can we go back to page 12, our packet, page 12?
Yeah, oh, yeah, absolutely.
Small firms expect. I'm looking down at the bottom and I see closed. And I say, really? It's just hard to understand that. Does that seem to be credible?
Yeah, let me look into that in a little bit more detail, because I would expect that in some areas that's much higher. And in fact, I did look at some forward-looking projections. For example, here in the Bay Area, if the question was asked, how do you expect that your business will close in the next 6 months? 8% of business owners, just as of this past month in the Bay Area, said yes.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if this is closed at the present, it seems it would be higher, but that's okay. Maybe that isn't considered in there. So 8% is interesting.
Yeah, 8% forward-looking in the Bay Area. So I'm hoping that my favorite small businesses are not in that 8%.
Yeah, well, that's why I'm skeptical.
Yeah, I mean, it's an important chart, but it is anecdotal on one level. It's not empirical. They're not out counting. It doesn't look like in this particular chart. But when I did review it, I looked at it in the context of riders on our buses and ferries. And if you total up the 4.6 months to never in terms of operations returning to normal levels, that comes in at 69.4%. So a massive employment shift if this comes to pass the way it is. So that's what struck me. I was also struck by the fact that number 1.3 has to be very, very low. But again, I don't know who's putting together all of this. The other observation I would make is that go ahead. Is that you, Leslie? Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry to cut you off. One thing I'm just kind of thinking, I wonder if as businesses close, if those survey respondents are kind of kicked out of the survey.
Possible.
That's possible as well.
Yeah. So between that and PFM doing their very best to give us some yield, I think the overall message here is we're in very, very tough times financially, and no immediate help on the in the future is coming. I think it's going to be the long play, not the short play. Do you agree with that, Leslie?
Yes, I think you're right. We're settling in for a long, extended period of low rates for sure.
Yep. Other questions?
Yes, Dr. Sobel, this is Dr. Belforte.
Yeah, jump in.
Thank you so much. Leslie, I guess I have maybe a longer term question. If I'm not mistaken, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that the Feds created $2 for every $1 that was in the market, and that's going to point eventually to a higher inflation at some point. And I know the Feds are talking about holding those interest rates down. I'm just wondering, projecting out, what do you anticipate happening? And I'm not asking you to give us a direct answer. I know you always tell me that if you could answer the question directly, like you'd probably be a bazillionaire. But we do know when you create money, there comes a payment at some point for those dollars that you created, and it's in the form of inflation. What's kind of your thought process on that and how it might affect us?
Yeah, that's a good question. And certainly the million, or should I say multi-trillion dollar question. I think, the Fed is kind of priming the market by giving us this directive, we're not necessarily going to start raising rates as soon as we hit that 2% level. We're going to let inflation run a little bit hotter. We're going to take a longer term view. I think a lot will depend on what happens not just here in the U.S., but also globally. A lot of countries outside of the U.S. are now looking at negative interest rates. So there is certainly some runway before I think inflation gets too rampant. But to your point, with the Congress issuing all these stimulus, the Treasury kind of printing out dollars and issuing debt to pay for it, there will be a reckoning at some point. I think PFM's official view is that inflation will remain low, at least for the near term, but it's certainly something that we're going to keep an eye on.
Great, thank you.
Good. Other questions for Leslie? Okay, hearing none, that concludes the discussion on this item. And Madam Secretary, can you find out if anybody from the public may wish to comment on this?
Sure. We'll be pulling the
Thank
public line now. Thanks. Hang on.
Is there anybody on the line that wishes to speak under this item today? Anybody wishing to speak on this item or any other Finance Auditing Committee meeting item today? Okay, thank you.
Okay, I take that as a no. So Leslie, thank you very much for your report. Much appreciated. I know you work hard on it, and it's valuable input for us. So thank you. Hearing no public comment, may I have a motion on this item from someone on the line?
I'll move. So moved.
Great. Ratification. Yep, absolutely. And may I have a second?
Second. I'll second.
Wonderful. All in favor?
Aye.
Oh, no, we're going to do a roll call. I'm sorry. My bad. Madam Secretary, would you call the roll on this? Thanks.
No problem. We have a first from Second Vice President Cochran, and we have a second from Director Frederick, starting with Director Arnold. Absent Director Belforte. Absent Director Fewer. Absent Director Frederick.
Yes.
Yes. Director Garbarino. Absent Director Grosboll. Absent Director Hernandez.
Aye.
Aye. Director Hill.
Yes.
Yes. Director Maston.
Yes.
Yes. Director Moylan.
Yes.
Yes. Director Rabbit.
Aye.
Aye. Director Sears. Absent Director Sobel.
Aye.
Aye. Director Yee. Absent Second Vice President Cochran.
Yes.
Yes. First Vice President Theriault.
Yes.
Yes. And President Parr.
Yes.
Thank you. The motion passes 10-0. You are still a committee of the whole, even with the departure of Director Belforte.
Well, how about Willie? Doesn't Willie count as a
That's right.
kind of a quasi member?
That's true.
Yes. All right. Thank you. We will move on to item 6. Since there are no actions to authorize budget adjustments or transfers or actions to authorize related to grant programs for items 4 or 5. Item 6, however, is to authorize execution of Amendment Number 2 to the amended and restated Clipper Memorandum of Understanding. The staff report begins on page 25, and Joe Wire will present this report. Mr. Wire, are you on the line, and would you begin your report?
Yes, thank you very much, and I will begin the report. This, as mentioned, is the request that you forward to the board the execution of the Amendment Number 2 of the Clipper Agreement. The Clipper Agreement is how we, as a region, control and share the responsibilities for the fare collection system that most of us use. The agreement is between MTC, which holds the contract with the vendor, Cubic, that runs the program, and it's between MTC and 22 transit operators that use the system, we being one of them. This is the second amendment. The first one was a few years back. This amendment will run through February of 2026. The reason for that particular time period is to get it through the implementation of Clipper 2.0, new Clipper, whatever you want to refer to it as, but it's essentially the second generation of Clipper. It is a new system and with new equipment and new back office, and it will operate and carry us forward for a good another 10 or 15 years going forward from that period. There's not major changes in this amendment. It really addresses the cost sharing agreement for the most part, and it changes it slightly in our tune, financially less than say 10% of the cost that we pay, about $70,000 a year under normal circumstances, which of course, as you know now, we're not under normal circumstances, but when we go back to that. So it'll affect the amount we pay, and the major changes that we are getting through this is we are moving to an account-based system, which is the way the back office is run right now. All the information is carried around in people's pockets on their card. In the future, there will be an account sitting off in a computer somewhere, and the card will just be a way of recognizing it. And that means you can also use other instruments to recognize this account. And it'll make the other large change we expect our customers to see, which is a fully functional mobile app, which we can use to access that account and allow the customer to do everything that they would, more things than they can do now, and everything you would normally do on an account. The account-based system is not that unusual to the district. Our fast track system has always operated in an account-based system. You have a fast track account, and the tag just recognizes you as the owner of that account. So it's a similar type of technology, different company, different software, but a similar philosophy to that. If there are any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Wonderful, Joe. Are there questions on this item from board members? Okay, hearing none. Madam Secretary, do we have anybody on the line that wishes to ask a question, comment on this agenda item?
We have no speakers on this item.
Okay. Nobody in the queue, nobody jumping in since we last asked.
No,
so,
no one's new.
Okay, then that concludes discussion on the item, and I will call for a motion on the item if somebody would give me a motion, please.
This is Bert.
Wonderful, and this is on authorization of the execution of the amendment. And may I get a second?
Second.
I'll second.
Great. Madam Secretary, would you do a roll call vote, please?
Thank you. We have a first from Director Hill and a second from Director Fredericks, and I'll start with Director Arnold. Absent Director Belforte. Absent Director Fewer. Absent Director Fredericks.
Yes.
Yes. Director Garbarino. Absent Director Grossbull. Absent Director Hernandez.
Aye.
Aye. Director Hill.
Yes.
Yes. Director Meston.
Yes.
Yes. Director Moylan.
Yes.
Yes. Director Rabbit.
Aye.
Aye. Director Sears. Absent Director Sobel.
Aye.
Aye. Director Yee. Absent Second Vice President Cochran.
Yes.
Yes. First Vice President Theriault.
Yes.
Yes. And President Parr.
Yes.
Yes. Thank you. The motion passes 10-0.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is the status report on the fiscal year 2020-2021 budget. And if you look at your packet, you'll find that there's a staff report that begins on page 27. And on one level, I'm sorry there aren't a lot of people. I would hope a lot of people would be tuning in and listening to this and commenting. This is an incredibly important piece of this, especially as we reflect on Leslie's report as well. So with that, the report, I believe, will be given by Joe Wire. Joe, is that true?
Yes, that is. I'm happy to take it from here.
Okay.
Thank you. If I could have your page down to page 29, which is the table that we have been showing you the last couple of months. This report, as we've said before, covers the district's progress toward balancing its 2020-2021 budget. If you look at the very bottom, jumping to the end, you look at the very bottom right-hand corner, it says 48 million is the cumulative total where we are now. So, the deficits or the shortfall started out about twice that, close to 100 million, and it's down to that. 48 million, that's excellent progress. This particular table only tracks decisions that have been taken by the board or staff, if it's a staff level decision, in order to reduce costs or increase any revenues. The other thing I'd like to talk about are the changes that have occurred since the last time you saw this table last month, and there are two of them. One of them is in line 8. Unfortunately, this is not a positive change. This is a negative change. In other words, it added to the deficit, or the thing we'll have to overcome, the burden we'll have to overcome. And this was that we have received new data from primarily MTC that has told us that our assumptions for how much TDA, STA, and RM2 revenue, those are revenues that we receive via the counties, Sonoma and Marin County, and or MTC, which is RM2. And they come from different types of taxes on the economy, or tolls. And those have been lower than what they expected when we put this originally together several months ago. So as a total, they represent roughly $16.5 million. We did have them in at something close to 18 million, so we've had to reduce that down to give it a better estimate of what we are being told now is that the district will actually receive. So that was one change, that line 8. And then the other change was in line 10. And this is, we had these, but it sums up to line 10. We had these in before, and what this represents is, as you know, we took our best guess, educated guess at what what demand our level of our customers would have each month. And so for bridge and bus and ferry, each one of these lines represent those. It determines how much revenue we receive from those particular activities. And what you see here are the either positive or negative changes from our best guess. So this represents the fact that it's if you look in the middle of the 3 bold numbers on line 10, which is $1.3 million, it represents the fact that we believe we're going to get 1.3 million more. We received 1.3 million more than we expected in those first 2 months, and that's good. So that's a very positive thing. If that positive went on for the entire year, it could get us close to 7.7 or $7.8 million. Of course, next month could bring something completely different, and we will, of course, update this every month. So anyway, all those are added together to get at that $48 million number that we talked about from the very beginning of the report. And with that, I'm happy to answer any of your questions.
All right. So are there questions for Joe on this report?
Director Maston, I have a question.
Yes, please.
Yes. On this page 29, line 7B, it shows a $2.2 million savings due to lower debt interest in the bridge division. What's making that happen?
The district has $61 million of commercial paper in the market. It put that debt into the market back in 2000 to help fund essentially phase 1 of the seismic retrofit of the Golden Gate Bridge. So each month it pays bondholders to hold that debt. Because it's variable, it's commercial paper, it's variable, it can be for a day or 90 days, no more than 270 days. The rates changes all the time. And as Leslie pointed out, the rates have dropped dramatically. And in her case, it's not a good thing because that's the money she earns for the district. And if it goes down, she earns us less. And she has to come and tell you that. in this particular case, it is a good thing because we are actually the one issuing the debt. So now we pay much less on our debt than we would have paid. We're required to budget a certain level based on the legal documents that govern our debt. And so we budgeted that level. However, there's no way, well, at least right now, we believe that rates will remain low for the remainder of the year, which we believe will, in our best estimate, keep the district's interest payments to others lower by about $2.2 million.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Sure.
So other questions for Joe?
Mr. Chair, this is Director Hernandez. I have a question, please.
Yes, please. Yes,
on
Director
this
Hernandez.
sheet and also on the recovery rates. My first question is to staff. Joe, thank you for your report. I have a question relative to your asterisk on the bottom of the page, referencing HRA funds, unspent HRA funds. Can you fill that out with a little bit more detail? What kind of, what dollar amounts are you anticipating will come as a result of the sunset?
Well, we are just to explain in case someone doesn't remember this. As when we went, when the board took action to move, and this was last month, to move the non-resident employees, the ATU employees, the painters, and the board itself, those four groups, into CalPERS program starting January 1 of next year. Part of that action was to say that the old HRAs, if there were any of those people were in high deductible plans, they had old HRAs, and that those old HRAs would sunset, and they would get people would get new HRAs based on the CalPERS program. So the employees will get this remainder of this year to spend the resources they have in their HRAs, and then they would get a further 6 months to complete the billing. And after that's over, if there is money left in those accounts, it reverts back to the district. Right now, there's a little over $3 million in those accounts. The amount they are limited to what people can spend it on. They have to spend it on things related to healthcare and that fall under the IRS guidelines. Our employees are spending those at higher rates than they used to at this time, not extraordinarily higher rates, but slightly higher rates. So we don't know exactly what will be left. The estimation is that some money will be left in those accounts when this is all said and done. And that's really why you see an asterisk instead of an actual number, because we don't really know what will happen. We've never gone through this before.
Okay, thank you. So $3 million currently, but that could conceivably all be spent, and there could be nothing remaining after the employees spend whatever's in their funds.
Exactly. They have the rights to spend whatever's in their funds, so sure. It's hard to guess. Yeah. But we would expect there to be something left, yes.
And our employees are fully understand that money is there for their use, but unfortunately for a limited time, correct?
Yes.
Okay. One other question, if you could clear something up for me on page 32 of your report, bus recovery rates. I'm looking at where you say, let's see, there's the line for projected ridership and actual ridership. The actual ridership actually is higher than the projected for the month of August. However, there's still a decrease in the revenue for the month of August. Can you help me understand why there's a decrease instead of an increase? Because the actual ridership was more than the projected. Just doesn't make sense to me.
No, I understood, absolutely. It comes from the nature of the riders that we have. We're traditionally, the bulk of our ridership was in the commute-based system, which would pay a fare anywhere from $4 to $12, depending on what service they avail themselves, knows where they started from Mill Valley or say from Santa Rosa. And what we also have the people who ride locally and may pay $2. So what we're seeing is that, which is conventional wisdom would see this too, is that the long riderships, the long haul rides, have dropped off almost to nothing, like ferry. Whereas the short rides in and around the county have not increased, but they have dropped less. So when we see that the ridership is slightly better than what we projected, what we're finding is that the majority of that, or the vast majority of that, is in these local rides, and they bring in less revenue per person. So that it's sort of what you're seeing is a change in the mix of ridership than what we would normally have thought when we built out these projections before. We didn't take that into full consideration, to be perfectly honest. We didn't see that dramatic change in ridership ahead of time. Of course, this is a very new environment.
Okay, thank you very much. That's clear now. Thank you.
Yeah,
thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yes, absolutely, and that was an excellent question and observation. It's something I think, as we all looked at the chart, it may have jumped out to us, or some of us anyway, that there was that discrepancy and what was the reason for it. So thank you for asking that question. And I know Director Hernandez and all of us, Joe, are looking under every rock, and I know you guys are looking under everything for additional funds. And it's just that $48 million number stares us in the face because we don't have the ability to print money. We don't have Golden Gate Bridge bucks, and so having a number that's this large should concern everybody and concern, frankly, the toll payers and everybody else that watches or somehow contributes to the Golden Gate Bridge Highway and Transportation District. And on that subject, I wonder if you would take just a couple of minutes. We received an interesting query regarding the use of 5307 grant funds. And I was wondering if, Joe, you would just take a moment to take us through that, because as board members are looking for every opportunity to find additional money, other people are as well. And I applaud them for it. It's just that a lot of this stuff is highly restricted. But would you take just a couple of minutes and take us through that?
Okay. These, the grant funds that you refer to, the 5307 funds, are funds that come from the Federal Transit Administration, and they are provided through the Metropolitan Transportation Administration, so MTC, for projects primarily related to the state of good repair of transit facilities, transit, rolling stock. That means buses, ferries, trains, if you're in the train business. And which our colleagues here in the Bay Area are, of course, in. So these monies come through, and they're allowed to be used for those purposes. The unique nature of this particular time that we're facing, one of the actions that was taken by the federal Congress was to allow the FTA, the Federal Transit Administration, to provide the flexibility to use those. To provide the flexibility to a group like yourselves, a local board that receives these funds, to use them for purposes other than what they're originally put forward for. And that was...
Joe, can you hold? Once again, if you're not on mute, would you please go on mute so that we can hear the speaker? Thank you. Joe, sorry about that.
No worries. So that this Federal Transit Administration has, through the Congress, was given the authority to provide more flexibility to local boards like yourselves to use these funds, and they provided, under the COVID scenario, so they provided the permission to use the funds for direct expenses directly related to COVID, and that would be, for example, protective equipment for your employees or customers, or preventive measures, cleaning your transit vehicles, cleaning your customer waiting rooms, whatever you happen to have. So they allowed that, and they also allowed the use of the funds to provide administrative leave to your employees if your employees no longer had work for them. So they provided that also, and it could be used. These funds could be used for those two purposes also during this time period. The district traditionally, as what the funds were slated for originally, the district traditionally places these funds into particular capital projects. In fact, it applies for the funds and programs and obligates the money into these projects. In the case of this particular funding that we have right now, those are primarily transit facility projects. One of them happens to be also part of the Golden Gate Bridge, the South End security. And a number of years ago, we were able to convince the federal authorities at the time that the fact that our buses use the bridge, and it's essential for the buses to operate over the bridge, that we could use it to secure the security of the bridge. And so we were able to allocate some of those monies to that very important project, which would harden both the facilities and put up a lot of electrical equipment around sensors and cameras and things like that on the south end of the bridge. And that was one of the many projects. So the question now is the flexibility has been provided. Is the local board to avail themselves of the flexibility? And if that were to take place, then funds would be moved from capital projects to be used for the COVID allowable expenses. If that was to be done, or administrative leave, then the district would have to use toll revenues in order to complete these capital projects. And those toll revenues would have to come either from raising additional toll revenues amount that we already raised, or from not doing other bridge-related projects, because these are primarily transit-related, except for the one I mentioned on the bridge. So that would be the outcome if there was a desire to take advantage of that.
Thank you, Joe. Yeah, it's highly complicated. It would definitely hit our 80-20 splits and that sort of thing. But I know that everybody's looking at whatever is going on in the district, and of course the projects that we have this money programmed for are could be considered critical in a number of cases, or if not critical, highly desirable as we move forward. So, are there any other?
Yes, Director Sobel. This is Mike Director Terrio.
Yes, yes. If you have a question, Mike. Yes.
Yeah, I do actually. Has there been any discussion among or with the granting agencies in the current economic environment of forgiving the 20% match requirement to give the receiving agencies more flexibility with those funds?
It's baked into law, so they cannot provide it even if they wanted to.
And
the match requirement is part of the transportation authorization. And so for highways, it's part of Title 23. For transit, it's part of Title 49. And it would take congressional action to change that. More significantly, the question is, will they provide more money?
Correctly, yeah, understood.
Yeah, and just to add to Dennis's comment, which was absolutely correct, the CARES Act, which was the federal government's emergency action, did apply that flexibility that you mentioned, Director. It did allow the district to, if it were using the CARES Act funds, to use it for 100% of the expenses and not have any sort of a local match. In this particular case, as mentioned, they did not put that flexibility. That was not allowed with the 5007 funds.
Yeah.
And we are advocating that if Congress provides additional relief, which we anticipate at some point they may, that they continue what they did in the CARES Act with respect to the 100%.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's what I would hope for, actually. Thank you.
Yep, perfect. Good. Well, I'm glad we talked about that. It's, I think there's an assumption that, money is entirely fungible, and it's not. It has fences around it, and it does for a reason. So, if there are no more questions, then for Joe on item 7, there's no action that's necessary here, but we do want to ask if there's anyone from the public wishing to speak on the status report on the fiscal year 2021 budget.
Thank you. We're going to pull the comment line really quickly. Thank you. Hang on one sec. Looks like we do have one speaker on the other line, so we are going to ask that Shane Weinstein join our call. So give me 1 second, and Justine, please introduce him.
Go ahead, Shane.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Shane Weinstein. I'm just kind of listening to the call, and I'm actually the one that brought up the 5307 grant money, and I got a response after a week of asking, which took a long time to answer what was given. It says, these are direct words from Joe Wire. The district has programmed $20.4 million in unspent 5307 grant funds to the projects listed below. $6.2 million towards repaving the employee parking lot at San Rafael on the administration building. The employee parking lot. So we're talking about some solar panels in an employee parking lot at $6.2 million, yet we're going to be laying off possibly 120 bus operators. I looked into this, and I don't know that you want to use, but the flexibility for use of 5307 funds when COVID-19 struck, the FTA provided the flexibility to recipients of 5307 use to those funds to pay directly for operating expenses due to COVID-19. He said cleaning materials and services and all that, but let's focus on what's really going on here. We're about to lay people off, and it includes administrative leave. So if the board chooses to redirect these federal grant funds, then these projects would be shelved and would not be built for the foreseeable future. Now, I understand, he said, traditionally, we're not in traditional times. We're in critical times right now. And you also said something, I heard something, I'm going to save this for public comment. Thank you guys very much, but I think that what we need to do is we need to look into these 5307 funds and say, I think that people's job is a little bit more important than repaving the employee parking lot at D1. That can wait. That can wait. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Shane. All right. Any follow-up comment from anybody? Okay.
If you want, this is Dennis Mulligan, the general manager.
Yep.
In addition to repaving, the bulk of the money is to install a solar array consistent with the board's objectives, and it would make the existing San Rafael facility net zero. It would allow us to provide enough electricity with that solar array to meet all of the existing needs of the facility that's out there today, and it would save us approximately $250,000 a year on our PG&E bill in San Rafael. So this project would be primarily grant funded, and going forward every year it would save us $250,000 of toll dollars that we used to pay the PG&E bill at San Rafael. So it's more than just a repaving. Certainly repaving is part of it, but the bulk of the money is the installation of the solar array. So I just wanted to have that one clarification on what is the actual intent of the project. Thank you.
Good. Okay. Thank you. Then we will move on, if everybody's ready, to item 8. We have the monthly review of Golden Gate Bridge traffic tolls and bus and ferry transit patronage fares. The staff report is on page 35, and Mr. Wire will present this item as well as 9A, revenue and expenses, which begins on page 43, and 9B, capital expenditures, which begins on page 53. Mr. Wire, would you begin your presentation?
Thank you very much. Yes, I will do that. If I could have you turn the page to page 37, which has the familiar 6 boxes on the table there. Just to head off any particular questions, there is an anomaly with the the data in the budget column. That's the middle column in each one of these 6 boxes. It's labeled budget 2021, and you can see there's a discrepancy between the July and August numbers, which is too large. That is something that we will fix by the time you get the next chart. Is just basically, I can't say anything but it's just an error. So if you could use, in this particular time, if you could look at the actual the column, then it would be, in this case, the boxes that are on your right is the one we will be looking at. This is the ones of dollars. The ones on your left are for patronage. So the 3 stack boxes on your right of the page, and the second to the right column is the 1920 actual compared to the 2021 actual. And that's last year compared to this year. That's all good data, and it really tells the best story. As you can see in the top box, that's bridge tolls and the amount of money that's been brought in, it was down 36% in our first month in July and about 37% in our second month in August. And that's essentially what we've been seeing all the way through. In other words, we're getting about, 3% of our revenues at this time. Then as we move on, you can see it if you go down to the next box, that's bus fares, the amount of revenue being brought in on the bus system. It's in around 80%. It's fluctuated a little, and that was pointed out in our last item. We saw the amount of loss grow a little bit in the last month, but it's still roughly around, we're getting about 80% of the, we're losing about 80% of the revenue, so we're getting about 20% of what we used to get. And we've been there for about 4 months, since early June, 3 months since early June. And then the same thing with ferry, we're in the 96 to 7% loss category, or getting 3% of the revenue that we typically would expect. And so that one represents that too. So they're the trends that we saw, unfortunately, they are very difficult trends for us to see. They are being consistent. We're not seeing much growth. We're seeing very little, in fact, just sort of bumping around those pieces. If I could have you then, you can ask questions on that if you have them. Otherwise, we can move on and look at page 43, which is, as your chair mentioned, which is the financial statements. And anytime, feel free to stop me for questions back on the other chart if you'd like to. On page 43, that gives you a real simple summary of the actuals versus budget for revenues, expenses, and then the revenue over expenses. So the first, in the middle of that page, the first set of numbers refer to the district revenues. Current year actual, 23.6 million. Last year's actual was 43 million. So a significant drop, about $19 million. That's the completely unavoidable reality of the district right now is summed up right there. We're just not getting the revenue we used to get. And as you saw from Leslie's report, and you're seeing just in the fact that we've stagnated for many months now, this doesn't seem to be changing rapidly. Now, of course, when COVID gets under control and they move, we had some counties move from purple to red just this last time, which allows a little bit more opening just this last week. So if that continues going, that's what will drive these numbers eventually. Now, the good news is, going to the next set of numbers, which are expenses, is even though the district is primarily or over on close to 70% a salaries and benefit organization, which means we pay most of our money to salaries and benefits, and we have not at this time laid off regular full-time employees, the district has still managed to reduce its expenditures. The first number is the current year actual, which is just over $32 million. If you compare that to what we spent last year, that was at $35 million. So even compared to last year, even though prices have gone up, we've been able to reduce the expenses by close to $3 million, and that is a very good sign. We expected the budget was at almost $39 million at this time. So from budget, we're down a little more than $6 million. So those are both really good things. Unfortunately, because the revenues are down 19 million, being down 3 million in expenses doesn't look so good. And it doesn't really get us, obviously, to where we need to be, but it is moving very much in the right direction. These include July and August, so you're really seeing now the service changes that were made, and this is where primarily a lot of these savings are occurring. The service changes that were made in the bus and ferry systems that occurred, especially in mid-July. They're seeing a full month of them carrying out, so they are making a difference in the right direction. It's positive. The last set of numbers are consolidated revenues over expenses. This is the situation that we're trying to resolve on with the chart that we looked at on the previous board item, or 2 previous board items ago, on the status of the budget. It said we have a $48 million problem to solve. As you can see, through the first 2 months of the year, we're $8.6 million down. And unfortunately, that's that's sort of creating that situation, creating that problem. The financials are in detail in the next pages by first consolidated and then each division, and I'm happy to answer any questions on those. So I'll stop right now and see if you have any questions on the operating finances before we look at the capital one.
Thank you, Joe. Are there questions for Joe before he moves on?
Director Maston, I have a
Yes.
question on page 51, and I don't know if you want me to ask that now or later.
I'm just going to pull down to it just a second. Yeah, okay. Why don't you ask that now?
Okay. It says, it talks about August 2019 versus 18. Shouldn't 2020 be in there somewhere?
Absolutely.
I kind of thought so, but
yes, we will get that.
I didn't want to guess.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Yes, we will get that changed. Thank you very
much. And so in the columns on the right, then which is one of those actually 2020 or not?
Yes, it absolutely clearly they should be representing 19 and 20, not 18 and 19.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Yes.
Good.
Very interesting. Very interesting. Yes, I will get that. Okay, let's take a look at 9B.
Yes.
This is just the beginnings of the capital budget. There's an anomaly here that creates, for example, the bridge division has a very, very large credit. Essentially, what we do each year, because the accounting procedures require us to put a stick in the sand at the end of the fiscal year, which in this case was June 30th. And so you accrue, in other words, you assume that expenses that have occurred in, let's say, June, but haven't been billed yet. So you accrue for them. Those accruals were, the bills didn't come in as fast as we thought they were, so none of those accruals were larger than we needed. So then you have to back those accruals out, and that's what you're seeing with that large negative. It's not that money's coming back into the district, it's that expenses that we thought were going to occur in June, we've already accrued for the expense, so we have to make up for that in a future month, which in this case happened last month. As far as a better measure of activity, which we don't unfortunately show in this report, and we will look to do that potentially in the future, is ongoing projects that are undergoing work right now. And we're running roughly the same percentage of projects undergoing work at this current time, with about 26 underway, as it would be similar to a few past year, which I think was close to 30. So as far as work is going, it's moving along at about the same pace. You just don't see it in these numbers, which refer just to dollars because of that large credit. If there's any other questions on the report, I'm happy to answer them.
Great, thank you. Other questions for Joe on item 9B? Okay, hearing none. The only question then is whether, Madam Secretary, anybody from the public may want to weigh in on this.
Okay, I will do so. Hang on one second.
Thank you.
We have no speakers on this item.
Great, thank you very much. No actions again on items 8, 9A, 9B. So at this time, we will move to item 10A on your agenda, which is a closed session. Before we do that, I want to thank everyone for being patient during today's meetings. These are tough sometimes to make sure everybody's being heard completely, and with the technology we have, we're doing the best we can. So we will be placing the public on hold for the duration of this item, and we'll reconnect the call after the closed session discussion. With that, Mr. Manolius, would you please take us into the closed session?
Of course. The committee will now go into closed session under Government Code Section 54956.9A to discuss potential litigation matter with regard to Mr. Vernon Royal, who's a bus operator.
We're back in open session.
Thank you, Mr. Manolius. If you would provide anything that you need to say about the closed session.
Great. The committee met under Government Code Section 54956.9A to discuss the matter that's listed on the agenda and has given its lawyer appropriate guidance to how to handle the case.
Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Manolius, for your report. Madam Secretary, do we have any members of the public wishing to address this committee before we move to the adjournment?
Go ahead, Shane.
Hi, good morning, everybody. Just very quickly, I think that we're staring down the barrel of some pretty significant changes. And I think we're all obligated to look down every avenue to find ways to save money and save jobs more importantly. Mr. Wire said traditionally this is what the district does with this money. Well, we aren't in traditional times. I'm going to send an email out to the board about this 5307 just to maybe educate you guys more on it. I kind of want to move on very quickly just to the HRA fund that has $3 million on it. That's ATU's money. That is the workers' money. Those are non-reps, those are ATU, those are painters that went to CalPERS, and they're going to lose that because in 4 months there is no way that the individuals covered by the HRA program can spend that amount of money just on doctor's appointments when they have great, fantastic benefits. Okay? It'll be $5, $10 here and there. That $3 million will have almost all of that left in it by the end of the day. That is workers' money. I suggest we look into 5307 money. I suggest we look into this HRA money where there's going to be a significant amount left, and let's save some jobs. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Shane. Is that it for public comment?
Yes, we have no other speakers.
Very good. Well, then that takes us to the final item on the agenda, which is a motion to adjourn this meeting. Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Wonderful. Do I get a second, please?
Second.
Perfect. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none. Thank you, colleagues. That concludes this meeting of the Finance Auditing Committee. The time is 11:14. Have a good day, everybody.